students, I am Dr. Shikha Pandey, Associate Professor from Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So today we are going to discuss about the definition and terminology that is related with the module number 3, that is biodiversity and biotic resource. So let's start the basic definition and terminology that is related with this topic, biodiversity and biotic resources. First of all, we'll discuss about the term biodiversity. Define the term biodiversity. So we can define it as the variety and variability among all groups of living organism and the ecosystem and which they occur. So this is, as the name suggests, bio is equal to living organisms, living beings, living organisms, and diversity is variability, variation. Diversity is called as variation. So this biodiversity word is made up by two words. First one is a bio and diversity. Bio is all the living communities, biotic communities, and diversity is variation and variability. So we can define it as like that: the variety and variability among all the group of living organism and the ecosystem which they occur, in which they are living, means variability and variation among all the living organisms in which they are living is called as biodiversity. Means what? All the plant, if we'll talk about this example, like all the forest ecosystem, pond ecosystem, water ecosystem, human beings, birds, everything, all living organism that are residing on this earth is called as biodiversity. And the diversity and the study of diversity and variation among all these biotic life is called as biodiversity. So this is called as biodiversity, means it is part of environmental science which will deal with the study of the diversity among individuals, species, whatever that is residing on this earth is called as biodiversity. Variation and variability among all group of living organism and the ecosystem in which they occurs is called as biodiversity. So now next thing is about the defined genetic diversity. Diversity is, when we'll talk about diversity, means variation. So diversity is of three types, as we have already discussed, like diversity at the level of genetic variation, diversity at the level of species variation, and then ecosystem diversity. So first level of diversity means the lowest level of diversity is a genetic diversity. Means the genetic diversity is based on the variation between genes, that is the functional unit of hereditary information. The genetic variability is essential for the healthy breeding population of a species. So gene, as we know, gene is the basic unit, functional unit of a life, and it is a variation based on the variation between genes of an individual. That is, and gene we can call it as functional units of hereditary information. So the genetic variability is essential for the healthy breeding population of a species. This is called as diversity at the level of genetic variation, means diversity at the levels of genetic variation in a gene of an individual. When we'll talk about a normal community of a E. coli bacteria or a human being, so one human being to another human being, what is the variation? What is the variation between two human beings? Then the genetic level of variation is called is example of this kind of variation. Means two rose plant is there, two rose flower is there, but what is the difference? What we can call them the diversity between them? So both of them have different genetic level. That's why different gene pool. That's why we can call it this diversity as a diversity at the level of genetic variation. Next variation is about the species diversity. What is define the term species diversity? It is simply the number and relative abundance of a species found in a given biological organization. Means this diversity, this variation at the level of a species diversity. Species diversity variation is called as number and relative abundance of a species, means number of a species and their abundance of a species that are found in a given biological organization is called as species diversity. Means diversity at the level of a species. Means if we will say the example of many group of species are living at a place, but they are different in the color, shape, variation. So this is called as the biological relative abundance of a species found in a given biological organization is called as biological diversity. Now comes to the next definition related with this topic is the biotic resources. What are biotic resources? because this topic is already having biodiversity and biotic resources. So the next terminology related with this subject is the biotic resources. Biotic, what is biotic resources? Resources that is derived from the biosphere, like living things and form forests and material derives from them, is called as biotic resources. Means those resources that we can obtain from the biosphere, like the living things that is present on the biosphere and the materials that is derived from them, is called as biotic resources. Next is the values related with the biodiversity. What is the consumptive use value of biodiversity? So the consumptive use value of biodiversity puts on a product of nature which are consumed directly, means which are consumed directly without passing into the market. If we use firewood by cutting down a tree or consume an animal after hunting it, is called as consumptive use value of biodiversity. Means this is related with the values of biodiversity. So consumptive use refers to the direct utilization of biodiversity goods. Direct, we can, if we will eat animals by hunting, then it can comes under the category of consumptive use value, because consumptive use value is a direct use and direct taking the benefit of this biodiversity without passing through a market, or without in any modified way or in any different source. That means directly utilization of the benefits from the biodiversity is called as consumptive use value of biodiversity. So it can be cutting down a tree or consume an animal after hunting it. Example is the firewood we'll get by cutting down tree. Example is firewood by cutting tree, and next is hunting of consume animal, fishing, consume animal after hunting, and third is fishing. You don't have to pass through the market. No any different sources there. Directly you are consuming the product, is called as consumptive use value of biodiversity. Means that put on the product of nature which are directly consumed by an organism without passing through a market. And next is the question is about define the productive use value of biodiversity. So productive use value is the value put on the products of nature which are consumed after passing through the market. For example, we'll buy fish from the market, then it will be have a consumptive use value. Productive use value means two type of value of biodiversity is there. First one is the consumptive use value. Second is the productive use value. Consumptive use value means like will take benefit directly from the biodiversity, and productive use value will put on the product which are consumed after passing through the market. And its the example is the, if we'll buy fish from the market, then it will be have a productive use value. So this is the basic difference between these two kind of values. Means biodiversity value is related with the biodiversity, because biodiversity that is present on the earth is a very rich, and it is providing us lots of things. It is providing us a food, shelter, eating for crops, animals is there, some meat are there. We'll get everything from the biodiversity. That is medicinal plant is there, drugs is there, everything is there from the biodiversity. That's why its value is very important value to the human being life. And that type of value is divided into two categories. First one is like consumptive use value, and second one is the productive use value. Productive use value related to the use of the product which are consumed after passing through the market. Its example is, if we'll buy fish from the market, then it will be have productive use value. Like that, consumptive use value is if you are consuming the product directly without passing through the market, is called as consumptive use value of biodiversity. Now comes to the next definition that is related with this subject is the define endemic species. Endemic species is an indigenous species which breed only within a specified region or locality and is unique to that area. Next definition related with this biodiversity is the endemic species. Endemic species are those species that are indigenous species which breed only within a specified region or a locality and is unique to that area. This is a basic understanding about the endemic species means those species that will belongs to a specified region or a locality, and is unique to that area, and that must be unique also. And India is having a very high number of endemism also. And one more category related to endemic is that they are rare also. They are rare or endangered, because obviously if that species is unique to that area, and that will present only to a confined area, only a particular area, it must be in the case of endangered or or threatened species. So this is the example of endemic. This is the basic definition of endemic species, like those species that are endemic to a particular area, that are endemic or native to a particular locality or particular condition, or that can be a unique to that specific area. So India is having a very good number of endemic species, like about 62% of amphibians, 50% of lizard, 53% of freshwater fishes, and 36% reptiles, 10% mammal, and 33% of flowering plant are endemic to India. And that's why India is having a three hotspot. That hotspot word is already related with the subject, with this thing, endemic species. So that's why India is having a very rich biodiversity, very rich, very good condition, very rich tropical area. That's why that number of species, almost 50% of lizard, 53% of freshwater fishes, and 36% of reptiles are endemic to India only. That's why India is having a three hotspot. First one is Western Ghat, Indo-Burma region, and Indo-Himalaya region. So there are three hotspots in India due to this endemism of species. Next is a question is like define invasive species. Invasive species in not native species. We'll understand with a normal basic term that those species that is not native to a place. So an animal or pest or weed that can adversely affect indigenous species and ecosystem by altering genetic variation within species, or affecting the survival of the own species or the quality or sustainability of natural communities. This is called as invasive species. Invasive species are those species that are not native to that place, but they will enter into the ecosystem and they are surviving there, and they are affecting the indigenous species of that particular area. Means they are affecting the indigenous species, means already present species of that place is called as invasive species. They are very notorious and they are invasive also, so their predator is also not there. So they started growing much because predator is not there, and they can survive in any natural resources, and they are affecting the already existing species also. So this is invasive species. Invasive species will enter into any atmosphere by in India by buying rice from US like that. The example of this invasive species is the Parthenium. Grass is the example for this invasive species. Parthenium grass is a very common grass. You will find everywhere in India. You will find this is a aeroallergen. This is a aeroallergen, and that will enters into India by the exchange of some seeds from foreign, or exchange of any plant material from foreign. Some weed will come, and that will survive. This weed is surviving in India, and it is growing very fast, and it is a capacity of this aeroallergen. It can travel miles of places in a very small particle in the airborne is there, and that is a very bad aeroallergen. That's why this example of this invasive species of Parthenium histophora, you can see it in anywhere. It is a very common grass that is available everywhere. Now comes to the next definition, that is what are endangered species. So endangered species means when a number of species of a particular type is reduced to a level is called as endangered species. Critical level, when a total number of species is going to be reduced to a very less number, is called as endangered species. And its example is giant panda and tiger. And the reason of this endangered species is sometimes pollution, habitat destruction, all are the reason of this of getting any species as endangered species. Means a number of species, automatically the number of species will be reduced to a particular area, and their number is reduced very less. That's why this species is called as endangered species. Same is happened with the tiger. Indian tiger number has reduced almost 400 to 1400, but 1400. That's why government has made many plans, many projects, that is called as Project Tiger, to save tigers of the Indian tigers, and now their number has been increased more than 3000. So tigers, once a tiger is an endangered species, but now they are growing well, and government has made many projects. Government has given many things to protect this tiger in India, because this India is India. These tigers, Indian tigers, are endemic to India only. Now it is its population has been increased, and it is an example of endangered species. Next is like a defined hotspot of biodiversity. So hotspot, we can define hotspots is like hotspot can be defined as a region which are known for their high species richness and endemism. Means those place where many species richness is there, and at the same time endemism is also there, and at the same time extinction or endangered species is also there. So means more richness is there, species very high richness is there, and endemism is also there. Means only those kind of species are found in that place which are endemic to that area, means which can live or which can survive to that particular area only, is called as hotspot. And they are a very high chances of getting endangered, because they have very little habitat, and they are surviving at a very small places. That's why this is called as biodiversity hotspot. Next is, what is the conservation of biodiversity? Means why this conservation of biodiversity, and what is the conservation of biodiversity means. So the conservation of biodiversity is a protection, upliftment, and scientific management of biodiversity, so that it will to maintain at its threshold level and derive sustainable benefits for the present and future generation. Means conservation is of biodiversity is the protection, and then its upliftment and scientific management of biodiversity to maintain it at its threshold level and derive the sustainable benefit, and it will derive some sustainable benefit for the present and future generation. So this is like a conservation of biodiversity. Conservation of biodiversity is very much important to derive sustainable benefit. Sustainable benefit. Why this conservation is important? It is important to get sustainable benefits. To sustainable benefit means to take the benefit at present also, and then future generation also. That's why this conservation is very much important. And what to do in this conservation is the first protection, upliftment, and then scientific management of biodiversity. So it will maintain its threshold level and derived. It will be helpful in the derivation of sustainable benefit from the biodiversity and maintaining it for the future generation also. Next is about the what is in define the term in situ conservation of biodiversity. So conservation of biodiversity into its own habitat is called as in situ conservation of biodiversity. So the conservation, protection of wildlife, flora and fauna in its nature itself, means in where they are belonging into their own habitat, is called as in situ conservation of biodiversity. And its example is the national parks. National park means those places that should be protected to conserve the biodiversity, means from where they are belongings. It's a sanctuary is also an example of this in situ conservation of biodiversity. Sanctuary, dolphin sanctuary is there in Bihar. Dolphin sanctuary is there in Bihar. So what will happen at that sanctuary? Dolphins are present in a very more amounts, so that government has made a sanctuary of that particular area for dolphin and dolphin conservation. So conservation of species into their own habitat, into their own house, or into their own home from where they are belongings, is called as in situ conservation of biodiversity. Means conservation is very much important. Of conservation of biodiversity is very much important, because without conservation will not get sustainable benefit from the biodiversity. Only will get sustainable benefit if we'll conserve it, if we'll uplift it for our future generation, if we'll take benefit from biodiversity, and then we'll do some conservation of biodiversity, because India is having a very high and very rich biodiversity, and due to high endemism, high richness, more variability is there, and more extinction rate is also high. Because of more richness, more species is there, their habitats are very little places. That's why their richness is going to be reduced. So that this endemism is very much important, and it is very important to conserve the biodiversity. So its conservation is of two type. We'll discuss in the next lectures. First, in situ. First, we are going to study about the in situ. In situ means conservation of biodiversity into their own habitat from where they are belongings. Now comes to the next question that is related with this subject is the list out the common hotspot in India. India is having a very rich biodiversity. India is having a very high variation of biodiversity. That's why India is having 3 hotspots. Among 35 hotspots of total world, India is having 3 hotspots. Okay. So 3 hotspots are the first one is the Eastern Himalaya region, means Himalaya region, and Western Himalaya, Eastern and Western Himalaya region. Then Western Ghats and Andaman Nicobar region, and Indo-Burman region, and Western Ghat and Andaman Nicobar also. So 3 hotspots are there. Eastern Himalaya and Western Himalaya all together they are making. And then Western Ghat is there in the western side, that we are belonging to this place, that is Hyderabad, Telangana, means Andhra Pradesh. It will be sharing, Western Ghat will be sharing 4 states, Karnataka, some part of Telangana, some part of Andhra, some part of Maharashtra. So these 4 parts are sharing into the Western Ghat, and then Andaman and Nicobar Island is there. So that India is having a very rich biodiversity, and due to richness of biodiversity, hotspots is 3 hotspots are already available in India. Next is about what are the rare species. Means rare species are the species which are not endangered at present, but they are having a very high risk of getting endangered in the coming future. And the example of this rare species are elephant and reindeers, etc. Now comes to the next question that is related with the threatened species. Means threatened species are those species which is abundant in its region, but they are severely depleted in the to other. Means they have threat to getting endangered. They have threat to get endangered in the coming future, because due to their habitat loss and forest destruction and habitat destruction, and due to their entering of different species into their habitat. That's why their habitat loss is there. So that there will be many threat to that organism is called as threatened species. Means those species that have threat to getting endangered or getting rare or getting critically endangered is called as threatened species. An example of threatened species is lion, tiger, sandalwood, etc. They are very much important species, and they are abundant in its region, but they are depleted. Their resources is depleting, their habitat is depleting due to the activity of human activity, or sometimes other species also. So that they are going to be threatened in the coming future if we will not think about these species. An example are the lion, tigers, and sandalwood. Now again, what is Red Data Book? Red Data Book is the book that contains the list of endangered species. Red Data Book is the book that has been given by IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. IUCN is an organization that is made by United Nations. United Nations has made, and that's why its name is called as International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. This is called as IUCN, Natural Resources. This is a Red Data Book. A Red Data Book has given a list of endangered species of flora and fauna. Whatever is there, they're all list of all species into a list, and they have been categorized as their availability. So 7 to 8 categories is there in this Red Data Book. We'll discuss later. Some many categories is there, and in this category they have put all the plants and animals that are present in this earth, and that has been given by IUCN, and that book is called as Red Data Book. Next is define the term poaching of animal, poaching of wildlife. Poaching of wildlife is the illegal trade of wildlife product by killing prohibited animals is called as poaching of wildlife. Wildlife has been killed due for to obtain some valuable product from them is called as poaching of wildlife. Like people are killing elephant to get their teeth. Tigers is killing to get the skin of tigers. This is called as this example of a poaching of wildlife. Poaching of wildlife is a very dangerous crime in these days because government has made many rules for the killing of wildlife or poaching of wildlife, and it is an illegal trade of the wildlife products. That's why government has made one convention on this that is called as CITES. It is the International Trade Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species, means endangered. It is a convention has been made so that will be stop the illegal trading of animal articles into the international market, and it is a convention has been made that is on the sites that is called as CITES, Convention on of International Trade of Endangered Species. Means they have made rules regarding the international trade or illegal trade of endangered species, that is called as CITES, and poaching of wildlife is related with this, and poaching of wildlife is again a reason of getting any species to be endangered. Now comes to the next top point, why India is a mega diversity nation. India is having a mega biodiversity nation. This is a very important term that is related with this biodiversity topic. India is one of the 17 mega biodiversity countries in the world, and then the country is divided into 10 biogeographic regions. India is called as mega biodiversity nation, means India is having a 10 biogeographical region. That's why it is coming under the category of mega biodiversity nation. India is one of the 17 biodiversity nation countries in the world. And what is the criteria to qualify mega diversity nation? So the criteria to qualify for mega biodiversity nation are they have at least 5,000 of the world's plants as endemic, and they have a marine ecosystem within their own boundaries, so that nation will be called as mega biodiversity nation. Means at least 5,000 of their species of the world plants are endemic in nature, means those species that are found at only one place that will belong to a particular area. Endemic species, and they have own, second point is that own marine ecosystem within their boundaries, within the country boundary, they have own marine ecosystem. So that what are the 10 biogeographical zones of India? So first one is Andaman and Nicobar Island, coastal regions, northeast region is there, that is also a very rich region. Gangetic Plain is also very rich region, that is the middle of the India. Ganga river is there. Then the Deccan Plateau of the area of Chhattisgarh and Odisha. Next is the Western Ghat area, that is some area of Karnataka, Kerala, Andhra and Maharashtra. Next is the semi-arid region. Then Indian desert zone, that is that will be Rajasthan, and then Himalayan zone, that is Himalaya zone is there, that is Uttarakhand and all those regions. Next is Trans-Himalayan region like Ladakh and all. So these are the 10 biogeographical regions of India. That's why Indian biodiversity is a very rich biodiversity, because due to this kind of variation is there. Means in only a single country you will find that 10 biogeographical zones is there. Means every type of climate is there, and many different zones are there, and they have their own marine ecosystem within their boundaries. That's why India is coming under the category of mega biodiversity nation. Next is what are the categories of Red Data Book? Red Data Book contains the list of endangered species of plants and animals. This Red Data Book has been given by IUCN. IUCN is an part of United Nations. United Nations has made a program for the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Nature Resource. In this way, this IUCN has been posted a book that is called as Red Data Book, and it will contain many categories there in this Red Data Book, and they have categorized all the living species, plants and animals into different categories. So these are the different categories of this Red Data Book. First one is the extinct and extinct in the wild. Extinct means any species that is extinct, that is not available. Means like we can say that Dinosaur is totally extinct. Nobody has seen dinosaur. Dinosaur will not be come again into this earth. So this come under the category of extinct. That is dodo one bird is also there. That is also extinct. Next is extinct in the wild, means those animals that are extinct in the wild, means that is not present on the forest, but they are present in a ex situ conservation in any captive breeding program. So that is called as extinct in the wild, and its example is Asiatic cheetah. Asiatic cheetah. This is an example of extinct in the wild. Next is critically endangered, then vulnerable. Critically endangered means those species that is going to be very high risk of getting endangered. Endangered is that is endangered but don't have very high risk. Next is vulnerable means they have threat to going to be endangered in the coming days if we'll not save them. Next is the least concern, means least concern, we have very least concern about all these species. Near threatened means nearly to threatened, maybe they will be threatened. And then data deficient means data will not um, available for that particular species. Then not evaluated means those species that has been not evaluated, and another arrow is there, not evaluated species is there. Then here we can see that all species are there. Then evaluated from data deficient to endangered, that is called as evaluated species. And then adequate data is there, and this is again classified into different parts, that is classifier, development and validation. And next, classifier application is there. So this is about the different categories of Red Data Book. Red Data Book has made these categories. First one is the extinct in the wild, critically endangered, vulnerable, least concerned, data nearly threatened, data deficient and not evaluated. So these are the different categories of this Red Data Book, and this Red Data Book has been given by IUCN. IUCN is called as International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. Now comes to the next definition. It is like what is the criteria for hotspot? Again, we'll come at the point of hotspot, means how a place will get that is a hotspot. So a region must meet two strict criteria. It is two strict criteria is there. First one is there that it must contain at least 0.5% or 15% of species of vascular plant as endemic, means almost 50%, 1500 species of that particular area should be endemic. Endemic means should belongs to that particular area only, means they have belongs to that area only, they are native to that area only, is called as species of vascular endemic species. And it has also having a very high risk of extinction of species. So it will be have to lost at least 70% of its primary vegetation. It should be lost. That's why it will be coming under the category of hotspot, means that area will take the criteria of hotspot. Next is biological hotspot are area that are extremely rich in endemic species of both plant and animal. It should be very much rich. It should be extremely rich in case of plant as well as animal also. Next is what is National Biodiversity Act? Once a convention was there, that is called as CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity. So in 1992, then it will recognize the sovereign rights of a state to use their own biological resource. That's why National Biodiversity Act, means in CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, they have made some rights to every state to use their own biological resources, and they have made rules and regulations regarding the use and equitable sharing of the benefits from their own biodiversity, is called as Biodiversity Act, National Biodiversity Act, NBA. Now, next part is there. Next question is there. What are the major threats to biodiversity loss? Means what is the major threat we are thinking for this biodiversity loss? Next question is that what are the major threats to biodiversity loss? Biodiversity loss is a very important terms that is related with this topic, is the loss of biodiversity. Because loss of biodiversity is there, some threats of for the loss of biodiversity is the first one is the loss of habitat, means habitat destruction. of any species. Habitat destruction will cause the species to how can that species will survive if their habitat is not present. Then again, the poaching of wildlife like illegal trade of wildlife. This is like illegal trade, poaching of wildlife. And then man and wildlife conflict means a conflict between man and the wildlife. This is again a reason for the biodiversity loss. Next is the destruction of coastal area. Destruction of coastal area means the habitat destruction. Again, here comes the point, that is habitat destruction. Habitat of the coastal area has been destructed due to the human activity, due to the pollution. That's why they have a threat for the biodiversity loss, means those biodiversity that belongs to that particular place, it will be having very high risk of getting endangered or getting critically endangered. That's why they are the major threats for the loss of biodiversity. Biodiversity loss, as we already discussed, that India is having a very high richness of biodiversity and high variation of biodiversity. Due to more variation, the threat of getting endangered, threat of biodiversity loss is also very high. And for this reason of this biodiversity loss, is the first one is the habitat loss, and then poaching of wildlife hunting and illegal killing for the trade of wildlife, and then conflict if now human beings are expanding their houses up to the forest area. So if they will disrupt the habitat of a tiger, of any animal, what that animal will do, they will enter into the human area, and that conflict will start between man and wildlife conflict. And due to that conflict, sometimes man will kill the species, and that is a loss of a species. That's why. And next is the destruction of habitat of coastal area. Coastal area, destruction of habitat that is present in the coastal area, because coastal area is a home of many endemic species. So if destruction is there, when the species will be survived, the survival of any species will be very less. Next is the what are stand for the IUCN. IUCN stands for the International Union for Conservation of Natural and Natural Resources. It is an international union that will be made for the conservation of nature and natural resources. That's why Red Data Book has been given by this IUCN. Red Data Book has been given by this IUCN. Red Data Book contains the list of all plants and animals that are endangered or that are, what category is there, which category they are getting in this book, because they have made many categories, as I have already discussed. Like they have made many categories like extinct, nearly extinct, or extinct in wild, endangered, threatened. So that many categories there, they are categorizing all the plants and animals that is available on the earth into the Red Data Book. That's why IUCN has been given this Red Data Book. Now this was all about the terminology, basic terminology and definition that is related with the biodiversity and biotic resources. In this lecture, we have discussed about the basics of biodiversity, types of biodiversity, in situ conservation of biodiversity, national park and everything, and hotspot of biodiversity. India is having a mega biodiversity nation. India, what is the criteria to qualify as a mega biodiversity nation? And next is the what is the criteria to qualify as a hotspot, and how many hotspots is there in India? Already India is having a very high, rich biodiversity, and very rich endemism is also there. So this was all about the richness of biodiversity. In the next class, we'll discuss about some more definition terminology related with this subject. So thank you for today's lecture.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.